trying to scare me. I'm not going to sit on the sidelines. I'm putting together this new team to get justice. This is our destiny.
So who else is sad that we have 4 more episodes to go for the first season of Stargirl? Aloha! Welcome to Cyntillating Reviews, and tonight we will be reviewing episode 9 of the hit DC Universe original, Stargirl. We are finally getting to the punchline. I know I said that the last few episodes, but I think this time we seriously mean it. I very much enjoy this episode, and I thought it was a treat. I thought it was a blast. Now we're finally getting to the punchline of who is what now, and we'll talk more later at the end, but to me personally, we're finally getting to the point where I've been waiting for since episode 2 or 3. This video will be in the style of a podcast, so if you want to minimize my videos while doing something else while listening to me, that's totally fine. I won't be offended. Spoiler alert is now in effect. We move back into the past where it says decades ago. Now it doesn't specifically say how long ago. It doesn't say like 2 decades ago or a decade ago. It just says decades ago. We move back into the past where we see rats in cages with green lights on their heads. One is flipped over dead with a red light. This is where we see Dr. King in the past, who is holding a bottle of what looks to be your average painkillers, and he walks out to the car for the night where he suddenly hears somebody's thoughts. Just for safe clarification, we'll just call this guy a thief or a carjacker. The carjacker comes and points his gun at Dr. King, demanding his wallet and keys. Before the guy can pull out the gun, Dr. King soon came to grips of his sudden and unusual power, knocking the guy down with his telekinesis powers, resulting Dr. King to kill the carjacker. He returns back to the office as he records himself, kind of like recording an archive video where Dr. King says, quote, "I think I just killed a man tonight," end quote. Now in the present, Henry Jr. returns back to the secret room where he discovers his father's costume and piles of videotapes labeled Day 1, Day 2, so on and so forth. This is where we get a background story of what happened that night. Dr. King states that the police report says that there was some kind of seizure that caused the carjacker's death, but Dr. King feels and tells that he is completely responsible for the man's death. With Dr. King's funding being denied for an experiment, he states that he did the clinical trial testing on himself, which results in with headaches at first, but then he turns to where he was able to read the carjacker's mind and use his telekinesis thoughts to bring him down. He ends Day 1 tape by saying that the clinical trial test has been a success. Courtney then tells Pat that she could read Henry's mind and how terrified and frightened he was, and can compare the feeling of fear and sadness that the two shared on what happened that night that Brainwave was sent to the hospital. This is where Courtney brings the idea on how she wants to ask Henry Jr. for help. Pat says that the best case scenario is that the ISA would come to Blue Valley and go underground to hide, but with Dr. Ito now involved, there is something else in the works that is throwing Pat off as he brings the thought that it could be impossible to kill Dr. Ito, as he has experimented numerous times on himself until he became something that is not human, with now his villain name being revealed as we know as Dragon King. Pat explains that him and quote-unquote Sylvester, who I don't think I explained in the beginning, Sylvester is Starman, aka Courtney's father, quote-unquote, even though Pat still doesn't believe that that is Courtney's father, but that's not the point though. But moving on, Starman and Pat fought Dr. Ito in the past in a different team, which this team is called the 7 Soldiers of Victory, which consists of a shiny knight. Could this be the same knight that we saw in action a few episodes ago, who we all know as Justin Janitor, who fought Cindy with his own golden sword? Pat then adds on some of the heroes that consist of Vigilante, Crimson Avenger, Wing. He then says that Dr. Ito was planning to build a weapon that was designed to destroy New York until the SSV, which I will refer to them as the 7 Soldiers of Victory, destroy the weapon. What blows my mind is that the SSV never got the credit, but instead the Justice Society did. Really, that kind of sucks that you would know so much, even go as far as saving the world, and you would never get credit for it. Like, really? I see the SSV more of a behind-the-scenes group. Courtney concludes the scene that they need Henry Jr. to help. Moving on to the school, we see our good old janitor Justin doing his normal cleaning duties until a familiar humming sound reaches his ears. He raises the mop and holds it horizontally, and as we pan out, we see our cosmic staff lighting up and humming as it's alive. He drops the staff as he's in shock, and he picks it up, but instead it's the mop. So, wait, what? I believe he was maybe hallucinating this. I'm so confused. Maybe with him being the Shining Knight and being part of the SSV, maybe it was some kind of recollection of his fighting days back in the day, but who knows. What I'm kind of disappointed is that, again, this is the one and only time that we hear of Justin Janitor in this episode. We have 4 more episodes to go, so I hope we get at least 20% more and to see who he is and what he's capable of and how he can be part of the season finale. Moving on back into the episode, outside of Cindy's house, Beth uses the goggles from Dr. Midnight to see if anyone is home. Chuck, aka Dr. Midnight, states that no one is home, and per Blue Valley High School records, Cindy is withdrawn from school to study overseas, which Beth can immediately pick up on that lie. The truth is that she's actually been held prisoner by her own father, as she's locked in a cell underground where Dr. Ito's hideout is. She says to him that if he doesn't let her out, he's going to die like how she killed her own mother. He walks to her and closes the hinge door on her, the little, lock peep hole thing, whatever, on top of the door. I don't really know exactly what it's called, but for the sake of it and for the sake of my research and doing doors anatomy, I'm just going to call it as that. But obviously not planning on listening to anything that Cindy has to say, seeing how Cindy's mess up actually reveals that they don't need to wait for Brainwave to wake up from the coma, as they have Henry Jr. to target now, as he was able to unlock his own telekinesis power. We then move back to seeing Henry Jr. watching more of his father's archive tapes as he practices with his own powers, which I think this is a cool scene, by the way, if you ask me. I like how we can see that he's training himself with his own telekinesis powers while he's learning more about his father. Moving to the school, the teen gang discuss on Henry Jr. joining the group for help. Yolanda and Rick are 100% against this idea, while Beth is okaying with him joining, as she says that everyone can change, which I agree, but the fact on how he destroyed Yolanda's high school career, it would take me a very, very long time, if not maybe never, to give somebody another chance like that. Henry Jr. continues watching the tapes as he moves on in discovering his father, as he takes notice of the change that his father has gone through, change of powers and his own mentality, personality, as he said that he killed another man again, and how he first felt better until he reads the next mine. A doorknob turns, revealing the king maid, stating on how a lawyer is on the phone for him regarding his father, as she said out loud in her mind that he would be better off dead. Henry Jr. tells her off until a high-frequency noise appears in his mind once again. When it disappears, he can hear his father speaking in his mind. The conversation wasn't very long, as it was just Brainwave calling his son's name. In the IJA meeting room, Dr. Ito appears with the rest of the IJA in the room already. He tells the IJA that they don't need to wait for Brainwave, as Henry Jr. has the telepath ability, and they can channel his telekinesis abilities through the satellite within the 6 states that it will reach, controlling everyone that will hear the frequencies. Henry Jr. walks into the hospital to see his father, asking him if he inherited the power. He speaks telepathically towards him, but he's getting no response from his father. A nursing assistant comes in and Henry Jr. reads his thoughts, and in a nutshell, let's just say I'm glad I don't have a power like Henry Jr.'s, and he says to his father that people are monsters. as we probably know his next plan and probably Henry Jr.'s first victim. And he does have a first victim, but it's not the nursing assistant. So we'll be moving along, and I'll be discussing that point later. Back at the pit stop, Pat is in the shop as Beth and Rick step in, as Yolanda is still not in a good mood to show up to a team where someone ruined her life. And like I mentioned earlier, honestly, I wouldn't be up for joining in a team where someone wrecked my high school career. Pat explains to the two that the tunnels that the school and at Cindy's home are all connected, and Pat wants Beth and Rick to see if there's some kind of underground network going on. Beth plans to work on the tunnel while Rick is still looking at his father's journal to see what the formulas mean. For those that don't know what I mean about the formula, Rick is the son of Rex Tyler, who is Our Man. And the powers of Our Man is he has an hourglass that sits on his chest and is put around his neck kind of like a chain. When he flips the hourglass over, you're giving 1 hour of extra strength. And you are only allowed to have that extra strength 1 hour for every 24-hour period, which I think is fair to me. Courtney walks into the hospital room meeting with Henry Jr., and this is where Henry Jr. discovers that it was Courtney that placed his father in the hospital. She says it was an accident as he threatened to kill her mom from the very beginning of the show. Courtney still continues to plead Henry Jr. to help, and she explains that her classmate Joey from episode 3 and Joey's father and Courtney's father all died because of the Injustice Society. I really do like how we can get this other side of Henry Jr. on how everyone can be cruel and hateful, while Courtney is telling him that not everyone is like that, and ask if he's gone deeper inside their thoughts. And if he has gone deeper, he'll be able to see the truth. While the two are talking, a sudden high-frequency sound shows up, and Henry Jr. tells Courtney to get out as she leaves him with a final thought to find her when he's ready. Family dinner comes, and I love how Barbara has a little crazy anxiety moment where she has guests coming and the boiling chicken is starting to overflow the pot. Pat saves the day, and just before he can tell her the truth of the JSA, Courtney appears and states that she failed the history test. Pat's like, no, she did not. Again, Courtney is trying to cover up about the JSA and how she cannot have her mom know anything about her being the persona of Stargirl until everything is under wraps. Before the conversation would continue, the doorbell rings, and lo and behold, the guests are Cameron, Courtney's classmate, and the one that did the nice painting flower decor cover up on Yolanda's locker when she was first getting bullied by Cindy and the others. Cameron's grandparents and Jordan, aka Icicle, makes the appearance. Henry Jr. is in the hospital, and suddenly he gets pulled into an empty hospital room. What surprised me is that I thought maybe it was his father or someone from the IJA, but no, it was actually Yolanda in her wildcat persona full of anger and rage. Henry Jr. used this power and reads that it's Yolanda. Yolanda tells Henry Jr. to stay away from Courtney and her family, and confesses to Henry Jr. that Courtney is trying to save him. Reading her mind once again, he hears that she will slash him and kill him if she comes anywhere near her friends. And she ends it with her telling him mentally that she trusted him and she loved him, and he betrayed her trust as she leaves through the hospital room. At the Dugan home, the family and Jordan's family are at the dinner table, and they say grace in an unusual fashion. I kind of like the small little icebreaker awkward moment where Cameron's like, don't look at me, I studied French. And here, when they say grace, they're speaking Norwegian. While we have the good that we are able to kind of read the subtitles, that's something you really, really don't want to see and hear at a dinner table. Back at the pit stop, using the goggles, Beth learns that Blue Valley was discovered by the other founding fathers. She then explains that the IGA can do what they want in secret because of those tunnels, and they confirm it with each other that the tunnel is under Blue Valley. Getting another chicken and dumpling pot from the oven, Courtney brings it over to Jordan, and without anyone else noticing except Courtney, he picks it up with his bare fingers as it was nothing, while Courtney burned her hands while she was trying to pull it from the oven. Knowing that unusual cue, Courtney calls Pat into the kitchen and they act like they are looking into the oven, where Courtney tells Pat that Jordan might be Icicle. Once dinner is over and everyone leaves, Courtney and Pat head downstairs to talk about the next plan, while Pat says that they are not doing anything until they tell Barbara. Then we hear Barbara asking, "What is that?" as she walks downstairs and notices the cosmic staff as it goes quiet and falls on the ground, as she holds a very confused and puzzling look on her face, leaving us with a giant cliffhanger on what is next to happen at Courtney's home. The final scene concludes where Mr. Green, the King lawyer, meets with Henry Jr. at the hospital. Being the smart Henry Jr. that he is, he reads Mr. Green's mind that he needs his signature so he can get the money. Obviously, a fraud lawyer. Henry Jr. recognizes this and he uses his own telepathic powers and ends up killing the lawyer. But that's not how this episode ends, as we hear a recognizable Henry King reawaken from his coma. This concludes episode 9 of Stargirl. I think this episode is my favorite, and we are finally getting to the jaw-dropping moments that we have been waiting for. Honestly, this is the first time my jaw dropped since episode 3. It kept me on the edge of my seat, especially during the last 20 minutes of this episode. One thing that I didn't catch is that with the headaches that Henry King Sr. or Brainwave was having when we were watching the video archives, was that it made his headaches feel better when he kills people. Now in the beginning, he was describing it as a pain-splitting migraine, and when he killed the people, it made his headaches feel better until he was able to read another person's thoughts, and then he would have to kill again, which was very weird to me. One more thing I want to point out is if we go back to the scene where we first meet the SSV in the photo, one thing that wasn't pointed out by Pat is that they didn't mention the green arrow in the photo. There is really no explanation as to why it was not mentioned, but other than that, it could maybe have some kind of involvement with the Arrow universe. Not 100% sure. Don't quote me on this one. I don't really know. That's something maybe we might discover a little bit later into the future, but I'm just going to leave it at that because I'm still learning my way around the DC universe as it is. What is your favorite moment or scene in this episode? What did you not like about this episode? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, press that like button. If you want to be notified for just the Stargirl videos, click on that bell to be notified for personal videos, or if you want to be notified and make sure you don't miss out on any of my content, click all notifications. Press subscribe and help me grow Cyntillating reviews to be something big. Look forward to that. Look forward to the next episode of Stargirl. I can't wait to see it. So until then, I'll see you guys next week for the new episode of Stargirl. Thanks for watching Let's Review with Cyntillating Reviews. If you want to read the full article of the review, click on the link down below. And we also have a Facebook, Twitter, and follow me on Instagram at CE Mattison. Our simplest prevention is our biggest protection. Take care of yourselves and others as you practice social distancing, washing hands, and staying at home. Let's get better by starting to make our world better to reduce the spread of COVID-19. See you later on another day.